Bookcase and Coffee presents Buzzing About Romance, a quick shot of romance.
Hey everyone, welcome to a quick shot of romance. I am Becky, and joining me for this episode is podcast contributor Carolina. Hi, Carolina.
Hey, Becky. I'm so excited to talk about this book.
I'm excited to talk about that too. And then I was going to be like, oh, we haven't done one in a while, but we did two in a row back in just like 2
weeks ago.
I don't know. As we all know, I could talk romance all day, every day.
I know.
If only we could just, read what we want for a living. I need that job.
I'm right there with you.
So on this episode, I am super excited because we are continuing my obsession with author Julie Saman, J. Saman. We are reviewing her latest release, Dr. Heartless. This is book 3 in the Boston Billionaire series.
Bachelors. Boston Billionaire Bachelors.
Oh, okay. Well, she put a lot of B's in there, and I cannot be expected to remember all of them.
I had to look it up. I'm like, what's the name of this series?
She should have just called it the Abbott Fritz Family Series.
I know, right?
Or the Boys of the Abbott's Fritz. Maybe we'll tell her to rename the series because she'll do whatever I say, right?
Exactly.
I was laughing because earlier this week she commented on something, and I'm like, it hasn't even been a year of my low-key stalking.
And I comment back, it hasn't been low-key.
It really hasn't. It really hasn't.
No, it really hasn't.
So, okay, Carolina, read us the synopsis from Goodreads.
He is cruel, insufferably attractive, and broken beyond redemption. After the nightmare I just ran from, those details should have made him the perfect storm of do not touch. Except I don't know any of this, other than the attractive part when I met him. Our story started on a lie. He pretended to be someone else, and I didn't ask a lot of questions, nor did I try to stop him when he snuck out of my hotel room in the wee hours of the morning. I was determined to start my new life on an uptick, and a wild one. One night with a hot stranger felt like just the ticket. Only I should have known something that good wouldn't end that easy. On my first night in my new house, our paths cross again when I discover he's my new neighbor. No longer the charming man I met in the bar. He's a grump, completely unfriendly and utterly intolerable. As if this couldn't get any worse, I quickly learned I'm also his daughter's new teacher. A wonderful daughter I can't help but fall in love with. Something I refuse to do with him. Our button pushing back and forth never fails to get under my skin. If anything, his sudden off-limits status makes resisting this devil of a single dad that much easier. Regardless of the temptation he presents, how searing his heated gaze is when I catch him staring, or how breathless our stolen moments leave us. After all, this is the fresh start I so desperately need, and I will not let anything get in my way. No, I can't give in to Dr. Heartless, no matter how hard he tries to change my mind. Can I just tell you, this is one of the best written synopsis. Like, you sometimes read them after you've read the book and you're like, okay, this only talks about like the first 30% of the book.
Yeah,
like,
you feel like
this is a great one that encapsulates the whole feel of the book.
Yeah. But it gives nothing away.
Without giving anything away. You get what you're like, what tropes are going to be hit. You get what the tension is. You get like,
yeah.
Anyways, I was rereading it again, going, this is a really good one.
J. Saman gives good blurb.
There's the hashtag. J. Saman gives good blurb.
So the release date on this is March 7th of 2022. This episode is dropping on March 8th. So the book released yesterday. This is available in Kindle Unlimited, and it can be read as a standalone, but you shouldn't. You should totally go back. Start with Edge of Chaos and just read them all.
I didn't. I just started with Dr.
No, wait,
Scandalous.
You read the last one in the Edge of Chaos series, though. Mm-hmm. You didn't.
I haven't read Edge of Chaos series.
It's so good. good.
I
Because that's the
know.
sister story.
I know. I need it. I need it.
Because
After reading this one, I was reminded that how much I need it.
because Brecken, the sisters, there's hints to her story and her being a bit
Yeah.
stubborn that, like, as a reader of that book, I was like, he's gonna do it. And you just can't believe that she's being so stubborn about actually physically getting married. Like, anyway.
Yeah. Well, and I'm reading it going, okay, I want to know the backstory to this. Let's I need to read it.
So tropes, they're neighbors, single dad, doctor, second chance at love for both, love after loss. This is a family series, and teacher parent, one night stand, grumpy sunshine, and it is enemies to lovers.
It has an enemies to lovers element,
but I don't typically
more
like
on
enemies.
His side.
What?
More on his side.
Yeah, it's more him being the enemy. She really tries to be his friend, and he's such an ass. Okay, so put out percentage on this book is 9%. I do feel like we need to give a little bit of a content warning on this. It deals with death of a spouse, long-term illness, cancer, and past domestic violence.
Well, I would categorize the domestic, it's more domestic abuse, verbal abuse.
And it's in her past. So let's set the story up for the reader a little bit, because that I think really helps go into it. Ellery is young. I think that she is late
27.
27. Ellery is 27 and recently divorced. She is divorced from a professional / famous golf pro, and kind of got sucked into his life and has made the decision that she's leaving. She's miserable. She's just not happy.
She tried once. And then there was like therapy and counseling and a little bit of a guilt trip. And then finally she kind of hits rock bottom, and she's like, I don't even recognize who I am anymore. And so she leaves.
Yeah. And she, with the help of a friend, leaves Florida where her ex lives and moves to the Boston area. And taking a teaching job at a private, elite middle school, high school. And she is the history teacher and
finds out on her first day she's also has a couple health classes.
Sex and human fitness, I think.
Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah. So at some point in her curriculum, she has to teach sex ed.
Yeah. So her first night into Boston, she is staying at the hotel at the Ritz downtown before she can get into her new house and her stuff is being delivered. She goes into the bar. She meets a very, very handsome stranger. I guess we should talk about who Landon is, though, for those that are reading this as a standalone. Yes. So before we get to the bar, Landon Abbott Fritz is the third oldest son, right? Or is he the second?
Well, it's Kaplan, and then is it the twins?
No, I think it's Kaplan, Carter,
then the twins, then Oliver.
So Landon is a twin. His brother's name is Luca. Landon in medical school got his high school sweetheart pregnant, and they got married young and have a beautiful daughter named Stella. And I think Stella was 18 months, 2 years old about, and his wife died tragically in an accident. And so Landon is the devoted, grieving single father. Like everything in his life.
He has basically been grieving since his wife passed away. We talked about Ellery's age of 27. Landon is 33. and his daughter is 13. So he has been grieving like for over 10 years.
Yeah. And it really, his grief just weighs him down.
Mhm.
And he has tremendous guilt
Yeah.
associated to the loss of his wife, and that he doesn't think he's enough for his daughter either. He's never quite sure he's doing enough for her.
Well, and part of what this story reveals is that he also realizes that his daughter, as she's becoming she's a teenager, becoming a woman, she needs more female, like,
Influence, companionship.
exactly, influence. And because if you've read the other books, we know his mother is fighting cancer. So his mother is not able to be there as much and be that influence and role model for his daughter. So,
and there are a couple of aunts and stuff, but Landon is so the book is called Dr. Heartless. It really should have been like Doctor Behind Walls of Steel, because even his own family, he barely lets them in.
Mm-hmm. And even his twin Luca, like, has to constantly push him and badger him, to go out, which leads us to their first night.
Right. So their first night,
Luca is hanging out with Stella so that Landon can go have a night out and enjoy himself.
Right.
Find a woman.
Every couple of months, he goes out and scratches an itch.
Yep.
He goes to the bar downtown at the Ritz, where his other brother, Carter, actually has an apartment and lives. And apparently Luca had been in the bar the night before. And so the bartender believes that Landon is Luca, calls him Luca in front of Ellery.
Yep. And at one point he debates on correcting him, and he's like, no, let me just run with it for right now.
Well, sure, because, by being Luca, he gives up some of the guilt that's associated that he's not there in that moment for his daughter. So they start flirting, having great conversation, and decide to go upstairs for a one-night stand. They are both just going to drown in the moment of stranger.
And they both own it. Like, it's not the only convincing they have to do is that they're gonna have this one-night stand with each other. I think there's such a great maturity and like sexual ownership of that whole interaction that made it super, super steamy and flirty.
I think that is something that I love about J. Saman and her writing, though, is sexuality, desire is very much, there's no taboo into it. You had a one-night stand? Okay. There is this maturity and ownership in making the choices you make with your body and doing the things you want to do, you desire to do. And there's no shame. Right. There's never a moment in all of this. And then, because fast forward to the next day, Landon is on Ellery's doorstep delivering a box that got delivered to his house instead. And it is a box full of her underwear. And it explodes because of a dog. And
Oliver's dog, who they're dog sitting, comes over, knocks him over, and the box goes everywhere. So the box labeled unmentionables, now all the unmentionables go everywhere.
Are everywhere. And but she's not even like, I mean, she's pissed because she finds out that her next door neighbor is her one night stand. And also,
and we didn't even say she was only wearing a robe, and when the dog knocks her over, the robe opens.
Right. For everyone to see. All the things. All the things.
So this like reintroduction meet cute is just like whatever could go wrong to make it the most embarrassing will go wrong.
It will. But it's so well done, because she's not like, oh God, no, it's my one night stand. She's like, what? How is he here? How did he find me? Who the heck is this guy? And then she finds out that he lied about his name.
Yep.
Dumbass. So that is their meet cute. Let's talk about Landon a little bit as a character. We kind of started about his grief and his guilt at the loss of his wife and trying to be the best father. One of the things about him that I find really phenomenal is he is a doctor and he's a cardiologist, thoracic cardiologist. So he's a surgeon. That's a very high-end specialty. It's his dad's specialty. That one even is like extra years. But even with that kind of intensity of a job, his daughter, Stella, is number one for him.
Yep.
He is devoted father. She is not an afterthought in his life.
No, I mean, there's things that he does for her safety, her protection. You know, he knows that the Abbott Fritz name within Boston gets a lot of notoriety. And so he goes out of his way to kind of stay out of the limelight. He has, their house is kind of, it's close to the city, but it has a lot of protection and security. He also does the sweetest things, like he built his daughter a greenhouse.
Right, because she's obsessed with plants and growing things and vegetables. And even so, the awkwardness of Ellery being his neighbor. So one night stand, now neighbor. Come to find out, she's also a teacher at his daughter's school. And her sex ed teacher on top of all of that.
Well, and the best part is that, of course, her first day is like meet the parents night. And the way the school works is that, you have certain kids Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and different kids Tuesday, Thursday. So she doesn't know that she's his daughter's teacher until he walks in for parent night.
Right. And he's kind of a jackass, like putting her on the spot. But I mean, he's worried. He's concerned because of past experiences, and wanting to protect his daughter. After his wife died, they were hounded by paparazzi, and
he was afraid that she was a name chaser and not like she was stalking him. So all of a sudden she shows up everywhere.
Yeah.
And as the reader, we know that's not the case.
We know that's not the case. Well, and there's this really great moment with Ellery and Stella. Stella wants to learn to cook. Her dad is not a cook at all, and they mostly just eat takeout, but she grows all these vegetables and she'd like to learn to cook them.
Yep.
And Stella asks Ellery to teach her, and Ellery gets the permission of Landon in order to do this, but even though he's not 100% okay with it because he doesn't fully trust her, he allows it to happen, but it happens in her house only a couple times a week. And it's just such a great moment. I think it also opens up to show what kind of person Ellery is.
Yeah. I think it shows a lot of compassion. And there's a fair amount in this story about Stella, as much as Landon gives Stella. She's a smart kid. She's not super outgoing though. So there's things that just set her apart, and she's been having a hard time make friends. And Ellery recognizes this as well. Like there's parts in the books, like she's like, oh, this sweet girl. And she knows that she's kind of a little bit of a loner. And so if I can help her, bring her out of her shell by helping her cook, teach her to cook, then I will.
Well, and Ellery had every reason to distrust Landon and to not be opening and inviting to Stella, given everything that had happened in her past. But she wasn't. I think that I loved that she was a hopeless romantic, not in the sense of love, but in just the sense of there is still good in people.
Right.
And that even though my situation was ugly, and I am not going to spoil all of that, Ellery's situation is ugly. It's ugly.
Yeah.
And how she turned out to be such a beautiful person, because you do see her level of care and love towards even just the students in her class. And her
She's
character,
she's the teacher that you like. How I wanted that teacher when I was
right?
growing up.
Yeah.
So she just builds a connection. I want to go back and talk about there's a scene in the beginning of the book. They've already met. They know they lived next to each other. They have their words, whatever. But the way that their houses are set, their bedrooms are kind of back to each other. And Landon's finally going to bed and he hears this crying, sobbing. And it's Ellery in her house. She's just crying because she's had a day, she's had a year, like she's been through a lot. And it's that nighttime kind of quiet, you're by yourself, everything just kind of catches up. And I was reading this and your heart's breaking because your heart's breaking for Ellery. You know a little bit of what she's going through at this point. She knows about the divorce and how low she feels. You know at this point that her and Landon, like they've had this one night stand, but now they're neighbors. But you know there's this kind of enemies elements to them, and you know that Landon is just as heartbroken because he's lost his wife. You know he's still grieving, so you know all of those basic pieces, and he's listening to her cry, and he's questioning if he did that to her. Did his actions cause her to break like this, or what could she be going through? And it was such a tragically beautiful moment and written so eloquently that I almost don't have words for how emotional that moment was and impactful it was.
The scenes between them through the window, the words whispered on a breeze, that distant connection, that kindred soul that feels, because I think that in a way some of that was Landon saying he wishes he could cry, that he could let out some of his own emotion and feeling, but he is so put up all these barriers and done everything he can to remain steadfast and in the moment and can't deviate from it, because if he does, he fears that he'll never stop crying. He'll never, the emotions will never stop for him. And so the beauty of the window of, like I said, the promises on a breeze, the letting of your feelings, you know, there was such a beautiful, like you said, beautiful tragedy to that it elicits major emotions in you as the reader.
And kind of after that chapter is done, I had to take a moment and just kind of absorb it. But you also get an element of Landon's character that, in addition to him like not wanting to go there because he doesn't know if he'll be able to stop, you also get the sense that this is the first time outside of his immediate family that he has care and concern for somebody else. So it's kind of this like awareness of, and slight protectiveness. It's not quite protectiveness yet. That gets later on, and possessiveness a little bit later. But it's almost like the beginning of the awakening for him.
Yeah. The chemistry in this book. Holy crap. It pops at 9, and that's something I really like about Jay Saman's books, is it might pop at 9. Sometimes when we get a one night stand, it'll pop at 9 and then nothing happens again until 60%. Oh, that was not the case in this book.
No, that was not the case.
It pops early and it continues to pop, and it was amazing.
So good.
I will not spoil it, but there's another scene with the window, and it was spicy. And it was,
oh my gosh,
it was so good.
I'm like, wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay, so I don't want to spoil this for anybody because I really, really want people to go read this. So let's do our wrap-up questions
Oh, jeez.
here.
We barely talked about this book.
I know, but this is one of those series that, goodness, I mean, because, the next book in the series is going to be Luca's story, we believe. And there are hints a little bit as to who Luca is. There are great moments with the family. And I will say, I do want to give this compliment. Something that Julie does that she does incredibly well is she has brought in past characters into this book. So the other brothers and the sister's friends are sprinkled in this story.
Mm-hmm.
But never are these pages feeling crowded.
Right.
Never do I feel like we tumble off and are no longer getting who Ellery and Landon are.
She gives you just enough, what they contribute to the storyline, but then she gives you just enough that if you haven't read those books, you're like, I gotta know this backstory. I
can't believe you haven't gone back and read Rena's book yet.
Because I know.
And I do hope that how she wraps that up is that I'm going to get a novella of that situation because I need to know how it's going to happen. Because
put it on your schedule, Julie. Put it on your schedule.
She knows she's going to listen
because we're going to want it.
Right? Okay. So Carolina, did you like this book?
Yes, I did. It's a heavier read. It's a much more emotional read, but so eloquently done.
Yeah. There is a lot more emotion. I think anytime we dabble into the world of grief and loss, that you're expecting a little bit more of a more emotional read, but this is so beautifully done. And the grief does not, while it is, working through grief and finding love after loss, there is plenty of that. This is truly Landon and Ellery's story. This is their romantic journey. So it's a very well balanced story.
Yeah.
And it's not overly angsty either. It's emotional, but not unnecessary angst.
I would agree with that.
Okay. Who do you think would typically like this book?
There is definitely an element of Billionaire because of the family and the accessibility. So you do get that. I don't think that was in our trope list as well. But that was just a small element of stuff. Like him being a doctor was just a small element. It's like, okay, that's what he does. If you want a very character-driven story, then you'll want to read this book. This is about their journeys and their evolution, and how they help each other through it.
Yeah. Like you said, character-driven storyline, if you are like a family series. So if you like the Claire Kingsley family series, then you should be picking up Jay Saman's books. They're very similar in vibe and feel, with kind of a low angst. Now, this one is definitely more emotional than the others, but there's no like push and pull between the two of them as characters, like being together. The push and pull is from outside sources and just makes, it's such a great story. Would you recommend this book?
Yes. 100% yes.
Yes, I would recommend this book, and on continues my mild obsession. Low-key stalking. Low-key stalking.
Major stalking.
Of Jay Saman and
Obsessive
her stories.
Stalking. Obsessive stalking.
It's okay. But yeah, everyone should run out and download this book onto their Kindle. It's beautiful. And the covers are sexy.
Covers are great.
These are covers for your shelves, people.
And they're all believable. They would be brothers.
Yes. Anyway, until next time, everyone, happy reading.
Find us on Instagram at Buzzing About Romance or on Twitter at Buzzing Romance. If you like the podcast, please leave a review. If you'd like to support us directly, join the Bookcase and Coffee Patreon and receive exclusive content only available to Patreon members. Check out bookcaseandcoffee.com for our on-the-shelf show notes.